Hey everyone, Wolf Lord Rho here. Well, Saturday we received the big reveal of the new 10th edition launch box set, as well as a little bit of lore information as well. So today we're checking out the model reveals and discussing what we know of the lore thus far. So no need for a spoiler warning today, and let's just jump straight in. Now I'm sure you've all seen the reveals over the weekend. But in case you haven't and was having a family weekend like me in the nice weather, as usual the Warhammer community website has all the information we need. So head over there to check it out for yourself, as I'm doing right now. So before we get to the lore, let's check out the main event of the reveal. The launch box set for 10th edition, Leviathan. Now this, even before I get down to checking out the models themselves, is, as you would expect, a very visually impressive set. What have we got here? We've got 25 Space Marine miniatures, 47 Tyranid, an exclusive rulebook, chapter approved Leviathan mission deck, and transfers. Okay, well the model count is certainly up there, that's what we like to see. First up, the captain in Terminator armor. I don't know this for certain, but I would assume most Space Marine fans are exactly the same as me here, and extremely happy about getting the new scale Terminators. They are the iconic Space Marine image for me, and it just didn't feel right not having them large and in charge of the new forces. Immediately, this gives me vibes of the old school Terminator Captain model. Captain Agenman here, as he's painted in the Ultramarine scheme, foot on the Tyranid head. He's elevated quite high, so he's going to really pop over the battlefield. But I really like this, it's literally just an update of the old school Terminator Captain. And that is undoubtedly what I enjoy most about these new models, how they are honouring the past. I definitely bring it up each time we're doing one of these reveals, but that's really because I think they're doing a fantastic job in this regard. The head sculpt here for our Captain Agenman is stunning, but I will say I hope there's a helm option as well, because that head's not going to work out for White Scars or Space Wolves. But apart from that, I mean, just look at it, he's an absolute stunner. Note the little sway of the hips as well, the orientation of the torso. Just adding that little dynamic edge that takes it over the straightforward pose. Just these little small details and changes that just elevate the sculpt that little bit more. Librarian up next, and I don't care what you say, this screams Rune Priest to me. This armour painted up in Space Wolf grey, with runes glowing through, the eyes blazing blue with psychic power. The force emanating from the open palm. Oh, that is going to be awesome. You could even remove the icon on the top and have a wolf pelt draped over his shoulders. I really love the rune markings throughout the armour on this, how it's been painted to show the glow of the psychic power. Not something I could do admittedly, but if you're good at that kind of thing, that's really the route you want to go. I'm not sure I could do this guy in Ultramarines for me, because I always think of Tigurius when I think of an Ultramarines librarian. But just model wise, I absolutely love it. This has got to be added to my Space Wolves, and just no doubt about it. Next up, the Apothecary Biologis, is that? The Apothecary in Gravis armour. Pretty straightforward here. Interesting lore angle of him collecting samples of Tyranid matter. I mean, what could go wrong there? Definitely getting Alien movies vibes with that one. He's obviously very similar to the standard apothecary. I mean, there's not really much you can do with an apothecary at the end of the day. He looks good, nothing amazing, but what more do you want from an apothecary at the end of the day? I think this is the kind of model that's going to look really much better when you see it in person. When you can really pick out all those little details on the model, such as his tools hanging around his waist there. Lieutenant in Phobos armour, the man who's been trapped behind enemy lines and taken to claiming Tyranid trophies. I mean, he's definitely got Commando-esque vibes going on here. Should have these short brown cropped hair so he could do an Arnie Commando. He's armed to the teeth, a knife on the ground, dual wielding too, grenaded to the hilt and a bolter slung over his shoulder. I could see him Raven Guard or White Scars colour scheme. I'm more a fan of the standard power armour over the Phobos look, but could we really have a box set without a new lieutenant? You knew we were going to get one way or the other. He looks good. I can imagine him looking very nicely painted up, maybe in a different scheme. Like I said, Raven Guard or White Scars for me. On to Stern Guard. Scaled up Stern Guard finally. I'm definitely liking this aspect of bringing the older units into line with the new scale. I'm sure I'm not the only one out there who can't stand it when you've got units with different scales in your army. I know it doesn't matter at the end of the day, but it just bugs me, you know? Each time we get one of these new updates, I'm always really happy just to get the new scale increase. I'm also going to say, don't you just love the Ultramarines Veteran colour scheme? The first company's white trim with the helms. Maybe because the Ultramarines Codex was my first ever one, but that always evokes something in me. The same with Ultramarine Terminators. The memories of the first company's heroic stand against, what was it, Hive Fleet Behemoth, the first one? The 100 Marines selling their lives defending the Polar Fortress. Back when the loss of just one company was a truly devastating blow. I mean, these days we've got used to whole chapters being wiped out. But back then, the Ultramarines losing their veteran company. Now that was a major deal. I may be a Space Wolf guy, but I will always have a soft spot for Ultramarine veterans. And in speaking of which, the main event, the reason I'm here, the new Terminators. Oh, these look beautiful. I am really happy about these guys, as I've said previously. They just somehow feel more solid, bulky, dangerous. Like the literal walking tanks they are meant to be. Now, I have no doubt we'll get the unit box set sometime after, where hopefully we'll get the classic weapon options of the Heavy Flamer or Chain Fist for example. And then hopefully after that the Assault Terminators too, who I have a sneaky feeling may arrive when the Blood Angels eventually get their codex. But even for the standard poses we get in the launch box set, these guys seem to be unique in their stances, so that is quite nice. And honestly, I think I'd be perfectly happy with just these guys for my standard Terminator squad. Again, this is the standout unit for me by a country mile. Next we have the Infernus squad. What can I say other than Space Marines armed with flamers? Probably my least appealing unit out of the force. There's nothing wrong with them, but they're just Space Marines with flamers at the end of the day. The next iteration of the Intercessors, Hellblasters, etc, etc. As long as they're doing the job on the tabletop, that's all you can ask for. I do like that sergeant in the middle with the drawing of the knife. That's a nice standout pose compared to the rest of them, which is all pretty much straightforward. And finally, for the Marines, the Ballistus Dreadnought. Another update of the past, bringing the classic Lascannon missile launcher combo up to the Redemptor Dreadnought scale. Now, when I first glimpsed this in the big full content shots, I wasn't so sure. It looked a little, I don't know, long and tall. A bit fragile, but I think that must just have been the cropping or scale of the picture because you see it here and it's just absolutely beautiful. This is another absolute must for me. And I think this is the first time I've seen an Ultramarines Dreadnought in first company colours as well, the white and the blue. They're normally always in the second company colours. But this one looks good, I like it. First company definitely popping for me here. And that pretty much sums up this entire box set for me. It's all about those veterans, the captain, the Terminator squad, the Stern Guard, even the Ultramarine First Company Dreadnought. And I think I may even go for the Ultramarine First Company when I get them too. I've got a little force of 4th Company Ultras, and I think maybe adding some 1st Company will complement them nicely. The Librarian, however, has to go to my Space Wolves. There is no way this guy is not being a Rune Priest. However, moving on to the Tyranids, this is an interesting combination. It's all about the evolving of the Hive fleets, and that's what you can see in the models here, I think. A lot of striking similarities to existing breeds we've known previously, but now slightly different in certain areas. When I look at this picture of the Winged Prime, I'm not overly sold on him, but when you see the 360 in the video previously, it looks absolutely stunning. And I think that's where the Tyranids are really going to capture a lot of people's hearts, when you see the models in person. Now, the Neuro Tyrant, I believe, is going to be an alternative leader option to the Hive Tyrant, with this quite clearly a much more psychic focused option. You can really see those evolution traits in this one, hallmarks of the classic Zoanthrope of years gone by. They've also really managed to capture the elegance and weightlessness of the floating here on this one, something we've seen a lot with the Age of Sigmar models and the Nighthaunt, really coming into its own with the Tyranids here. I've got a feeling this is going to be a real centerpiece of Tyranid forces throughout the next edition. Just in sheer looks terms, he looks absolutely great, and I think we're going to be seeing a lot of this sculpt. Oh, the classic Screamer Killer Carnifex. Walking, screaming tanks of absolute destruction. In looking at the full content shot up here, he looks pretty hench, which is what you want to see. Definitely rivaling the Redemptor Dreadnought in terms of scale. But it's the detail of the sculpt that looks absolutely great. Really focusing in on the ribs and the cage, the muscles bundling underneath the armour. A very, very nice sculpt. I would like to see him next to the standard Carnifexes though, just to see how he compares. Does he fit in really nicely, or does he stand out a little bit? That's what I want to see. But on his own, he's definitely an absolutely beautiful model. Moving on to the Von Ryan's Leapers. Bit of a standout name for this unit here. I'm interested to see how these compare to Lictors, other than the fact they hunt in packs of course. Because model wise they feel very, very similar for me. Which they should, obviously, from a lore point of view, but I just want to see what they're going to do with the Lictor. Is the Lictor still sticking around? Are we going to see a nice new upgrade for him? And if so, how is he going to be different from these guys? Is he just going to be much larger? Or will we see a more subtle evolution that strikes a difference between the two? One thing's for certain at the moment, if we don't get a new Lictor, these Von Ryan's Leapers look absolutely miles better. New Termagants, nothing too drastic here, just a bit of modernisation in the sculpt, adding a bit more life to the poses. If they're still as easy to build as the old ones, then they're an absolute winner for me. The mainstay of the Tyranid army, got all the hallmarks of the old ones, would fit in with them perfectly, but now just a little bit more detailed and dynamic. Now, Neurogaunts are a new one, and they're definitely different looking to say the least. The description here tells us they share a symbiotic relationship with the parasitic neurocytes that cling to their backs. So they're guided by them, I'm guessing, hence why their eyes are covered up, and it's their purpose to protect the more powerful synapse creatures. So maybe a cannon fodder type unit here. Something to just throw in the way of your commanders to keep them alive. They're a bit odd looking on first glance, I'm not too sure how I feel about them. One of those units I'm looking forward to seeing in person once they're all built and painted. Next we've got the Barb Gaunts. Vibes of, what was it, the Biovores here, the ones with the cannons on their back? All these guys rocking a little missile launcher type on their shoulders. And I can definitely feel and see how they've gone for a more parasite feeling with these Tyranid evolutions here. I wonder if we're going to see that play out into the lore. The themes of parasites becoming more important down the line. It's interesting, there's only so far you can go with that until you verge into Nurgle territory, which would be cool in itself, a Nurgle versus Tyranids contest. Not too sure about these ones, a bit like the Neurogaunts before. I think these are going to be needed to see in person. They just feel a bit different to what we've seen before. Something I've just got to get used to, I think. But moving on, finally, the Psychophage. A psyker feeder. Metabolizes psychic lifeforms and turns them into corrosive ash. Now this is a fantastic evolution to fit the psychically awakened galaxy. This really works as something the Tyranids would adapt to for me. You've got psychers everywhere, okay, well we're just going to learn to eat them and harvest their power. That is absolutely fantastic. In terms of narrative, this Psychophage and the Neurotyrants really stand out as great logical evolutions for the hive mind to make. In a galaxy becoming ever more psychic, it makes sense for the Tyranids to adapt to that. Star of the Force has to be the Neurotyrant sculpt for me, I think. I'd have to see it in person, but the way it just feels like it effortlessly is gliding above the floor is an absolute winner. With the heavier head, the huge brain you can see, the way they just balance that heavy feeling of the weight above, elegantly dangling on these tiny little tentacles. One of the absolute showcases of how brilliant the sculpts are these days. But all in all, for the box entire, it's got to be the Terminators, the Sternguard and the Dreadnought for me. You know me, I am all about Space Marines and a lot of those models are ticking all the boxes I want. Definitely something I'm going to want to at least try and get. I know this one is going to be insanely popular. Hopefully GW do a queuing system for the website or made to order because yeah, this is going to be absolute nuts on release day, I think. Some of those Tyranid models are absolutely staggering. I mean, you look at this main shot and you see the size of them. They're really going to pop on the battlefield, or in the display cabinet for that matter as well. But anyway, on to the lore. Nothing too detailed to go on as of yet. I think we're probably going to have to wait for the first novels to roll around. But there is some intriguing snippets that provoke some thinking. First of all, we're told Hive Fleet Leviathan is now attacking from the west, which we knew, so nothing revelatory there, but it does say potentially opening a route to Terra, and with it approaching the throne world, it's time for the Imperium to launch a desperate counterattack. No full-on map here unfortunately yet, but that implies to me that it will all indeed be focused within Imperium Sanctus. I don't know how much is going to be involved around the more northern edge of the Eye of Terror. I hope it will, because that opens intriguing narratives with the Iron Hands, for example. But at the moment, you definitely are getting the feeling it's going to be far more west orientated rather than northwest. Secondly here, and maybe most importantly, it mentions the solution to this threat is not actioned by Guilliman, but by the High Lords of Terror. Now, the High Lords making big decisions shouldn't really be newsworthy. It's what they're supposed to do, what they have done for the past 10,000 years. But I think it is, because since Guilliman came back, it's all been about his decisions, him leading the Imperium's war effort. And now here we have the High Lords taking matters into their own hands, tasking Soulblade fleets to take the fight to the enemy. Small elite strike forces, not something on the scope of the Indomitus Crusade. Now, the immediate question that pops into my head here is, well, where's Guilliman? And we were told previously that he's still busy leading Indomitus elsewhere in Sanctus. But for me, this is a far graver threat than anything far out on the eastern fringe. You would expect Guilliman to be more involved, so I'm incredibly curious to see just what Guilliman is going to be doing. Don't get me wrong, this is major players of the Imperium striking back, Soulblade fleets of Astartes and Adeptus Custodes, Lord Solar crusading into the Segmentum to halt the Tyranid advance. But when you've got a hive fleet, the largest one ever, heading for the throne world, with Guilliman and not to mention the Lion elsewhere, now that does prompt intrigue. Terra for now you would assume is safe, but this is clearly going to be an evolving narrative. Something where if the Lord Solar and Soulblade fleets fail in their objective, Guilliman and the Lion could just be leaving things too late, if the Lion's even aware of it at all. There's going to be some good discussions on this when we get a clearer idea on just what's going on. I'm definitely looking forward to those. But anyway, that's it for today everyone, just a quick one to recap the big weekend reveals. I don't know about you, but I am more than excited to get my hands on those Terminators. But as always, leave your thoughts in the comments below, I love to read them. Huge thank you to all my subscribers, your support truly means a lot to me, it really does. If you're new, please consider subscribing to help the channel grow. And if you enjoyed this particular vid, then why not drop a like on it too. But with that said, I am off, and I'll see you all again real soon.